mother said I couldn't play outside anymore. Everyone had fled. She said the country was sick. But we would be okay.
It's 1993, and the isolated country of Hadea burns with the flames of civil war. The Organized Nations peacekeeper force withdraws, and in flood unspeakable horrors as the Sabinians and Palamists massacre each other in a conflict that will end only when one faction is exterminated. Remi, a native of Hadea who was smuggled out of the country when he was a child, returns to his homeland to find and confront his parents. But Remi is unprepared for what he discovers. Not only is the once beautiful country pocked with craters and strewn with bodies of thousands, but bizarre creatures emerge from beyond space and time. An enemy of the ancient past, they haunt the living and foretell the coming of a great calamity. Hadea has become a hell on Earth. But is hell its own entity, or is it a creation of humanity? Does it reside without or within one's very soul? The external evil that engulfs Hadea reflects the terror of which humankind's baseness is capable. This is the complete story of Hell Is Us. Remi Letam wakes bound and drugged in the interrogation chamber of a mysterious organization. They're interested in the Hadean Civil War and reported sightings of strange creatures, but also in Remi's purpose and how he infiltrated a notoriously closed-off country. Letam, who was separated from his parents at the age of 5, when his mother sent him from Hadea, struggled with the trauma of that night. He drifted between orphanages and foster systems. He lost connection with humanity and developed sociopathic tendencies, but always his thoughts went to Hadea and his parents. An opportunity arises for Remi to return to his native land when war breaks between Hadea's two religious and cultural factions, the Sabinians and the Palamists, shortly after the country's leader was found dead in an apparent suicide. Letam joins the ON peacekeeper force sent to control the conflict to enter the country, then quickly goes rogue in search of his parents. He's determined to confront and understand his past. All Remi has is the name Jova, a village in Hadea's Akasa marshes, where his father is supposedly the blacksmith. But Letam's search for his parents plunges him into a swirling waterfall of danger, of conspiracy, and of otherworldly history. All war is tragic, but here, the depths of human depravity are displayed as Palamist and Sabinian perpetrate horrors against one another. On top of this, white, humanoid creatures emerge from dimensional anomalies that dot the broken land. And a clandestine organization called OMSIF takes special interest in them for unknown reasons. The smoldering heap of current-day Hadea sits atop the ruins of old that hint at the country's storied past. This civil war is only the most recent in millennia of bloodshed. Hadea's raw emotions are tied directly to the extra-dimensional creatures, and Remi's own story runs closer than he initially thought. To fully appreciate the circumstances, we must first understand the road of events that led to this moment. Hadea's history is an endless train of inhuman abuse that began in ages past. In the 10th to 7th millennium BC, the region was populated by various roving tribes of ancient Hadeans, known as the Hasselans, who found shelter and sustenance in the vales surrounding Mount Obek. This massive spire of rock was, as it is now, the dominant feature of Hadea, and in its labyrinthine underground caverns rests a terrible power. Known in later days as the Eye of God, or simply the Eye, it's a maelstrom that teases at the threads of space and time, manipulates emotion, alters reality. The Hasselans discovered the Eye and revered it as the force of a higher power. They worshipped the Eye. Their rituals and beliefs gave birth to the religion of Sethrism. A mythological figure named Palom was first to discover the Eye. As a page from the holy book the Kata relates, "For before him lies a sight no man has ever beheld, nor dreamed of in his boldest fancy. Palom sinks to his knees, for he knows with all the certainty of his soul that he stands before the eye of God. In the religion's creation myth, the all-powerful Setherus gives birth to humanity, the earth, plants, and animals. But with him came a great two-headed serpent named Tiar. A great battle ensued and Setherus defeated Tiar. Before dying, Tiar sent out a mighty shriek, cursing humanity with overwhelming emotions and intoxicating passions. The curse of Tiar, as it's remembered, would have been the end of humanity if not for Setherus' sacrifice. He ripped out his left eye and placed it within the mountain. Its calming aura would cleanse his children of Tiar's curse and protect them from earthly passion. Setherism became the dominant religion, but it wasn't the only one. One branch of Hasselans broke from the rest in 2200 BC and worshipped instead Tiar. They were ostracized for their heterodox ways and eventually persecuted as Setherism grew. The conflict between benevolent Setherus and devious Tiar forever permeates the religious lore. By the first millennium BC, the Illigad Conclave, a theocracy steeped in Setherism, dominated Hadea's geopolitical landscape. They canonized Palom as the first saint and collected the unifying holy book of the Kata to standardize their religion. Only 8 individuals, the 8 high priests of Palom, were allowed to enter Mount Obek and beseech the eye of God. Their combined wisdom guided Hadea. Theocracy melded into autocracy, and the Illigad Conclave transformed into a government of exploitation and oppression. The theocracy lasted thousands of years. As their power grew, so did the people's oppression, burdened by cruel acts and unjust social restraints, until a young erudite dared to pen a thesis. Disillusionment simmered, ultimately erupting in an existential schism in 400 AD. Sabin Gaul, a reformist and freethinker, posted his scathing thesis against the Palmist Church, against the corruption and evil that infected Setherism. Like the theses of Martin Luther against the Catholic Church that lit fires of Protestantism, Sabin Gaul's thesis, a searing indictment of the conclave's corruption, demanded the separation of faith and power. An idea both revolutionary and heretical. His words ignited a movement, birthing the Sabinian faith and shattering the iron grip of the Palmist priests. A great battle was fought in 404 AD between the traditional Palamists and the reformed Sabinians in the Vissa Hills, and immortalized by the Weeping Night Shrine. Outnumbered and outmatched, they battled for 3 grueling days. On the last day, these blood-stained hills bore witness to the formation of a new faith. The Sabinians earned legitimacy through blood, and though they won the battle, the Palamists were far from vanquished. An ideological war tore through Hadea and claimed hundreds of thousands of lives in its nearly 3-century-long struggle. Remnants of Sabinian heroism and martyrdom can be found in the Vissa Hills, in Leith, and other locations throughout Hadea. It was a war of hatred and reform. Its scars would never be forgotten. The Sabinian leader Conde Colig said, "The choice between war and peace does not exist. It's a choice between war and endless war, and I'm afraid we have chosen the latter." During the war centuries, knowledge of the Eye of God fell into obscurity, likely due to the deaths of the 8 high priests of Palom and sacking of the Palom Cathedral in 403. 8 scholars, 4 Sabinians and 4 Palamists, realized conflict had to end before all Hadea was slain. They conspired in secret and formed the Guild of Lucidity, which blamed the curse of Tiar for propagating such strong emotions through their countrymen. For years, they looked to the past for answers, until around 600 AD, the Guild heard mention of the Eye of God, a safe haven that guarded against Tiar's curse. Their search brought them to Mount Obek. Near the summit, the Guild found an entrance to a strange and eerie place. After navigating through the maze, they finally discovered the Eye of God. The Guild of Lucidity changed their name to the Order of the Eye. They were a faction independent of the traditionalists and reformists. The Order sought only to end the conflict's bloodshed. They researched the Eye of God, observed how its power deadened passions and calmed emotions, and sought to extend its aura across Hadea. By this method, the hearts of men may cool and war finally end. The mighty oaks of the western woods lie felled. Let the forges burn bright and the anvils ring, and lo, our shroud, its breadth must be greater than we dared reckon. The Order endeavored to build a contraption to wield Sethrus's power. This massive structure, known as the Eminist Shroud, was intended to broadcast the Eye's influence, and this scrap of blueprint dates its construction around the year 700 AD. The time draws anxiously close. It has been so many years, so many failures and successes, but here we are. Will it work? But the Order played with forces beyond its comprehension and upset a delicate balance. In an instant, cold rationality snuffed the fires of emotion. Palamists and Sabinians laid down their arms, but peace came at a terrible price: time loops. A scene of unspeakable cruelty is ever the stage, a barbaric slaughter its sole performance. And yet, here lies the worst of it. The macabre play does not end. Those caught within its wretched snare have not perished, but still live. They feel it all. Time loops are ruptures in the fabric of reality that latch on to human emotion and suffering. Wherever powerful emotions took root, or where scenes of unparalleled atrocity played, time loop anomalies sprouted. The people trapped within were forced to repeat these tragic moments endlessly, made to inflict or endure torment for eternity. Hundreds popped into existence across Hadea as consequence of the Eminist Shroud's activation. The scholars of the Order rushed to turn it off, but to their dismay, the structure of metal and earth disappeared, consumed in a space-time anomaly. The Eminist Shroud upset the Eye of God's equilibrium, and in the year 706 AD, the Calamity struck Hadea. Time loops emerged, and such was their reality-altering effect that none could safely breach them, nor put them to an end. If this was all, the Calamity would be worthy of its name, but even worse followed.
They're demons. They're here because of the Sabinians. They're friends with the demons.
Specific passages. The Holy Kata speaks of TR's demons.
They're in pain. They're twisted, warped, and mindlessly roaming our streets. They search and want nothing. Aimless and empty like the holes in their bodies.
Demons of TR, ghosts of the dead, hollow walkers, all names given to creatures that emerged from the time loops, the limbic entities. The word limbic derives from the Latin term limbus, which means border or edge, and various structures and interconnected neurologic pathways within the human brain are categorized under the umbrella of the limbic system. The limbic system is highly complex and active in nearly all aspects of bodily function, but it's most vital in the areas of motivation and intent, of emotional processing, of memory formation, and even social facial recognition. Limbic entities are so named because of their attachment to human emotions and the profoundly human motivation behind acts of evil perpetrated throughout Hadea's history. Hollow walkers are precisely that, devoid of physical attributes, personal characteristics, and even tangible bodies. These ethereal figures are vaguely human in appearance, which renders them all the more terrifying. They are blank canvases, vessels for other limbic entities known as hazes. A limbic haze is affiliated with a specific emotion: grief, rage, terror, ecstasy, and the like. They derive their power from human experience and inhabit hollow walkers, tied by an umbilicus of feeling. Limbic entities are immune to conventional weapons. They're made of substances from a different plane and impossible to stop. Demons walk among us, specters roam the land. I have seen them with my own eyes. I have beheld the wicked things, maddening spectral shapes, writhing in kaleidoscopic colors that defy reason. their twisted forms swirling above the ground, shifting like a fevered dream. The time loops of 706 opened a rift to the limbic plane, and thousands of hollow walkers emerged in the first limbic invasion. They seemed to guard the time loops and struck down thousands of noble warriors as medieval fought otherworldly. Through their actions, the Order of the Eye created a more terrible threat to Hadea than the religious wars. Unstoppable monsters ravaged the countryside. To correct the disastrous outcome of their ill-fated Eminous Shroud experiment, scholars of the Order of the Eye scrambled to find a way to cancel out the Eye's expanded field of influence. This came in the form of Ammon inversion casts, limbic material emanating frequencies that disrupted time loop signatures. Massive flutes of restitution were erected to dampen the Eye itself, unfortunately to no effect. But in 708 AD, Order scholars developed a device that could invert time loops, end the cycle of repetition, and close the holes in reality. It has worked. We've sundered one of the blasphemous, bulbous apparitions, and with it, its wretched snare of ceaseless torment. Yet my heart did sink the moment I beheld the price. The poor Hadeans, once ensnared within that infernal cycle, now lay dead at my feet. Ammon prisms, limbic material enclosed in a metal casing, proved capable of disrupting the time loop signatures. It was a step in the right direction. The Ammon prisms, however, had to be placed in the center of the time loops, a place so violent and unstable it would kill any who entered. So, to prove their hypothesis, the brother Realm Strago sacrificed himself and placed an Ammon prism within a time loop. He perished, but the structure collapsed. Realm became the first proto-martyr, individuals who gave their lives to close the time loops that ravaged Hadea. With hollow walkers guarding these pockets, it proved nearly impossible to mend the fabric of reality. One battle ended with 2,000 human deaths at the cost of only one hollow walker. But this Pyrrhic victory would soon provide the Order the knowledge they needed to craft their own defenses. After much death and sacrifice, the time loops vanished, the invasion ceased, and the calamity was over. The Order of the Eye immediately went to work developing tools and defenses to protect Hadea should another calamity ensue. In 717 AD, they charged renowned blacksmith Calvin Modus with creating the Anvils of Modus, and forging weapons from limbic shards left by the Hollow Walkers. For years they toiled day and night, struggling to find a method of harnessing the limbic shard. Eventually, it was Modus himself who discovered a technique for molding the material into a usable state. The Limbic Forge beneath current-day Lake Sinan was a historical inflection point. From it came arms and armaments that could interact with limbic entities, blades that could strike Hollow Walkers. The feelings of elation and preparedness wouldn't last. The complete truth of the calamity and of the Order's attempt to use the Eye of God would only come into focus after centuries of turmoil. The meddling caused by the Eminous Shroud didn't create just one calamity, but rather trapped all Hadea in a limbic cycle that would repeat on the 1st of January every 33 years. After 706, much of the country's history follows the 33-year pattern of death, disaster, and powerful emotion. In the wake of the second limbic invasion, the theocracy of the Illigad Conclave was finally overthrown and replaced by the secular Loblina Alliance, formed between the four royal houses of Argaw, Umbra, Jihan, and Aster. Limbic invasions forced the Palamists and Sabinians to cast aside their religious differences and face a mutual threat. The Order remained in the background, a shadowy organization whose invisible hand guided Hadea and protected it against otherworldly forces. As the Church's power receded, the preeminence of kings and courtly intrigue rose. To help fight invaders, the Order of the Eye needed a caste of warriors. The Full Guard was created to protect the Order and help destroy time loops and the creatures protecting them. Armed with weapons from the Limbic Forge, the Full Guard molded into a supreme martial force, bound to no king, but rather an oath to preserve Hadea. Originally known as the Hellion Vanguard, as these ancient tomes describe, warriors began specializing against limbic threats according to their emotional sphere. By the second and third invasions, the Hellion Vanguard developed distinct orders and lodges. Their armor symbolized the limbic sphere they safeguarded against, and their combat knowledge focused on specific limbic entities. 8 Full Guard generals led their respective lodges against the 8 emotional spheres. This inscription found in the Limbic Forge states that the Full Guard are the stalwart spearhead against the limbic menace and all who would rise against our cause and mystery. For centuries, ambitious players vied for power over Hadea, while the Order and their Full Guard neutralized limbic calamities in secret. We've already touched on the grief and strife that broke out in the wake of Sabin Gau's reformation, but 3 other periods in Hadea's medieval history have significant influence on events in the current day, and each is cast in the light of strong emotion. In the 770s AD, Brom of House Astor, king of the eastern province of Asteria, manipulated events around the marriage of his daughter Fenelo Astor to Prince Von of House Jehan. Dressed as soldiers from the western kingdom of Argala, 33 of Lord Astor's men murdered the prince. Brom used this as a casus belli for war and called on House Jehan to aid him against houses Arga and Umbra. The so-called Bridal War lasted 3 years. It was a conflict that fed off hatred and rage, and it drew limbic entities. Following the bloody war, Brom Astor emerged as the victorious king over a united Hadea, and one of his first acts was to establish a secret museum in Battery named Ariga. The red fury King Brom felt during his rule echoes throughout the museum's corridors, as does the rage of House Jehan and that of Fenelo Astor after she uncovered the truth. Almost a century later, in the 850s, a cult developed in secret around the charismatic leader Francis Aldrich. The man and his followers uncovered forbidden knowledge on the twin serpent Tiar, and the cult of Tiar quickly grew in number. Those disillusioned by Setherus thought their god had abandoned them and had only to point at the limbic invasions for proof. They paid reverence instead to Tiar, and the cult reveled in hedonism and debauchery. Viga Feyler, the Queen of Hadea, approached Francis Aldrich in 857 and gifted the Plains of Mist so that his people might live isolated and free from religious persecution. She didn't realize the extent of his evil. He personally oversaw dozens to hundreds of human sacrifices to Tiar, and led drug-induced seances to better connect with the ecstasy promised by his god. After Aldrich sexually abused and sacrificed the queen's personal emissary, Viga Feyler revoked her protection and allowed the Palom Inquisition to root out heresy. The god hand of the Inquisition descended upon the enraptured cult members and massacred them. The euphoria of the cult of Tiar was finished, but the serpent's god faithful continued to lurk in shadows. The Palom Inquisition greatly influenced the character of Queen Harvor Reveta. Her uncle Thomas Reveta was a squire of one of the Talons during their fight against Tiar's servants. Heresy and apostasy consumed Harvor's thoughts. She was a staunch Palomist and saw reformist Sabinians as an evil on par with the cult of Tiar. Later known as the matron saint of southern Argala and also the Blood Queen, Queen Harvor Reveta was described as the destined protector of Palom and the inheritor of Setherus. In the 930s, Reveta waged a ruthless, bloody war on the Sabinian kingdom of Asteria. The conflict's death toll was only the beginning. In 937 AD, the Arcus Spire rose tall above the treeline of the Sinedra forest. Sabinians the realm over were brought in shackles to Arcus Spire, where they endured torture, torment, and terror. Palamis treated them without mercy or compassion. They starved the prisoners, beat and broke them, then led them naked to the spire's summit, where they were thrown off the ledge, fed to the maws of Tiar. Untold thousands perished in Queen Ravetta's purge. The Blood Queen's rule seized the heart of every Sabinian with terror, a dark stain on Hadea's history. In the year 950, after hundreds of years of religious, secular, and temporal conflict, the Order of the Eye and Full Guard directly grasped power. They had worked from the shadows to orchestrate events, but realized the course had to be steered by their hands. A coup that remade the royal family, the aristocracy, and the leading figures of Hadea saw influential individuals replaced by loyal members of the Order and Full Guard. Just imagine if they believed it a custom, if they thought it a jubilee, a time of joyous revelry. All our poor, cherished Hadeans, trapped unknowingly within our mistake, could temporarily be saved. They must perform the celebrations each cycle, each time it wakes. The Order established a 2-week festival, later known as the Holy Holiday and Week of Peace, to celebrate a just and lasting peace after nearly 600 years of war. This holiday was calculated to coincide with the cyclic activations of the Eye of God. A time acutely sensitive to emotion was flooded with sentiments of peace and bonhomie rather than hate and destruction. Meanwhile, they charged the Full Guard with devising a failsafe should their strategy falter, or worse, should one within their own orders attempt to upset the balance. Never shall they speak of what they weave. Never shall their lips betray the measures they set in place. They shall carry their burden to the grave, leaving behind only whispers in the blood of their kin, that their descendants may stand watch, that the eye may endure should darkness ever rise from within. This silent safeguard was a tunnel leading to the Eye of God beneath Mount Obek in the Limbic Forge, barred by metal and sealed with 4 locks, the keystones of which would remain hidden from the world. If ever an existential threat arose, the Full would enact their safeguard to save Hadea. The Order's meticulous plans bore fruit. The Limbic invasions dwindled in scope, each less cataclysmic than the last, creating fewer time loops and producing fewer Hollow Walkers. The Order and Full Guard worked quickly to rewrite history, a program of censorship to hide their mistakes in Hadea's bloody history, transformed Hollow Walkers from real threats to creatures of myth and symbolic demons. For many centuries, Hadea's history falls relatively quiet, as the Order of the Eye and the Full Guard rule the land. The Week of Peace ensures Palamists and Sabinians are at least cordial, if not friendly. Time loops have stopped emerging. Limbic entities are no more. The Order saw in their military Full Guard a vestigial appendage, an organization that was no longer necessary. They wished to disband the Full Guard, but its members knew too many secrets. They couldn't be trusted to go quietly into retirement. At the turn of the 16th century, the Order enacted a vicious betrayal. They gathered almost all members of the Full Guard in the Limbic Forge under the guise of a celebration feast. The Order poisoned the wine, and Full Guard bodies soon fell to the feast hall floor.
To another peaceful year! Hail!
To maintain secrecy, they betrayed their brothers. Only one leader of the Full Guard survived, Pentos Algia. He and whomever escaped the Order's trap fled to the Vissa Hills, the one-time hiding place of Tiar's cult, and from their organization's ashes founded the Vigil. From A Passage of Eternity, we hear this Order's creed. As the hours of the day slip by, as the months of the year pass and the seasons turn, in the 4 corners of Hadea, our Vigil endures. The Vigil was the Full Guard's spiritual successor. They believed that time loops, hollow walkers, limbic forces still presented a threat to Hadea, and continued to keep watch, but also to remain hidden from the prying Order of the Eye. Paranoid by the Order's ruthlessness, the Vigil maintained secrecy by limiting its members to family lineage. Sons and daughters would inherit the duties of their parents, knowledge and skill passed down by blood through generations. The Vigil preserved their ways as best they could. Times in Tropic March saw much lost and forgotten. From the Watcher's Nest, they protected Hadea from limbic threats and kept emotions from roiling. From the Middle Ages through the 1900s, malice slumbered in Hadea. Palamist and Sabinian lived in community. The Order of the Eye continued to rule, and the Vigil survived in secret. When the Great War consumed the globe and was followed shortly after by the ravages of World War II, the Order of the Eye realized how tentative was their peace, how vulnerable Hadea truly was. The Order worried that an outside force would stumble upon the Eye of God, take its power as their own, and spread its influence across the globe, transforming Earth into the hell of emotion that plagued the country. The problems of the 20th century couldn't be solved with medieval answers. To ensure their mission, the Order opened themselves to external aid. They enlisted the Zeal Council, a cabal of clandestine organizations, and their research militant arm, OMSIF. Zeal is mysterious, their true intentions not understood, but they took special interest in the limbic entities, the time loops, and the Eye of God. Hadea was an untapped reserve of paranatural forces that, if understood, could advance the Zeal directive. This prize fell willingly into their lap when the Order opened access to centuries of knowledge and material in exchange for protection. But Zeal and OMSIF weren't interested in sharing control, and over the post-war decades used both overt and covert methods to gather influence in Hadea. The Order of the Eye's invitation to Zeal coincided with what this note, written by a conspiracy theorist, describes as a flurry of activity around Mount Obek. Mining equipment, barricades, human bustle scurried through the caverns beneath Obek to gain access to the Eye of God. Several documents during this period reference black-clad guards and officers. OMSIF began deploying their field operatives to study limbics and uncover relics of Hadea's past. In 1952, a divisive figure named Garion Yankel rose to power as president of Hadea. Whether he was a member of the Order of the Eye or of the Zeal Council is uncertain, and regardless, he became a puppet that soon danced to the Council's tune. In the wake of World War II, Yankel led an increasingly authoritarian and isolationist regime for over 30 years. This missive from the 1950s highlights plans for the largely successful Operation Bastion, which closed off travel and communication into or out of Hadea. It severed transmissions. It erected walls and fortresses. To the outside world, all Hadea went dark. By the 70s, the Zeal Council had discovered Lord Astor's Arga Museum and restored its purpose as a limbic research facility. Here, their scientists studied time loops in an effort to control them. Their biologists studied composition and physiology of limbic creatures, and their OMSIF agents trained with limbic weapons. This mask artifact tells us that OMSIF was inspired by the Full Guard of old and developed their own military divisions based on emotional sphere for which they trained. Hadea's slip towards authoritarianism was marked by Yankel's revocation of basic civil rights in the 60s when he established concentration camps to hold any whose speech or actions went against the state. And then, in 1980, the president banned the Week of Peace, the most sacred of holidays that had kept the country safe from the Eye of God and limbic invasions for over 1,000 years. 2 years later, all sense of stability collapsed when Garion Yankel committed suicide. In Leith, the Ministry of Cultural Primacy turned into a factory of Sabinian propaganda that spewed anti-Palamist hate and sowed seeds of Sabinian nationalism. Universities, once bastions of free thought, grew dangerous for minority students as Palamis threatened Sabinians and vice versa. A constant stream of disinformation stirred paranoia and fear. In the 90s, a Palamist extremist bombed the Sabinian market in Maristan. Then, Sabinians rioted against the peaceful Palamist Evil March. A dangerous simmering of hate and discontent was very near to boiling. The truth is that it was all manufactured by the Zeal Council. In their study of the Eye in ancient Hadea, they learned of the 33-year cycle that plagues the country, and rather than suppress the Eye's influence, in the upcoming cycle they wanted to activate it through the strongest show of passionate emotion and inhuman violence the country had seen in a millennium. A final obstacle, however, had to be overcome. The Vigil continued to watch for upset to the status quo and slowly caught wind of the Zeal Council's interference, but they were hopeless to defend themselves when one member turned against the order. Vitalis Letam, a blacksmith in the village of Jova, and his wife Arabeth were both members of the Vigil and executed their duty well. After Arabeth gave birth to her son Remi, she realized the child's greatest hope for a future lay outside Hadea. Vitalis and Arabeth had a falling out, likely due to his loyalty to the Vigil over family. She left a scathing note for him. "I'll never pause again, never stand still, till either death hath closed these eyes of mine, or fortune give me measure of revenge." And under cover of darkness, she fled to Hadea's border with 5-year-old Remi. But the bastion was in full effect, and Arabeth was apprehended by authorities. In her final moments, she gave Remi her necklace and threw the child onto the back of a car destined for the world beyond, urging him never to return. Scarred by the trauma of that night and the mysterious necklace, Remi would hold on to his memories of Hadea and eventually find a way to return. From that moment forward, Arabeth despised Vitalis. While in prison, she was approached by agents of Zeal who learned of her knowledge of limbics in ancient Hadea. They offered to commute her sentence if she helped them track down members of the Vigil. Arabeth joined Omsif and rose quickly to field commander in Hadea. Her agents hunted down and assassinated several Vigil members. She delivered the Vigil a crushing blow and opened the door for Zeal to enact the last step in their plan. In 1991, Hadea descended into hell as civil war consumed the country. The Palamist Deimos division of Western Hadea fought against the Sabinian Asterian armed forces of the East in a ruthless conflict founded on centuries of resentment and fueled by propaganda. Heinous war crimes were carried out on both sides. Mutilation, rape, lynching, burnings, and torture became regular occurrences as a shell-shocked country grew numb to humanity. For 2 years the war raged. Fighting was most fierce in border towns like Jelgin, Leith, and Akasa. The carnage unleashed generations of pent-up emotions, and the outpouring of such passions supplied the Eye of God with everything it needed to reopen. Zeal's masterful orchestration of events around Hadea culminated on January 1st, 1993. The Eye of God cycle aligned. Time loops caught hundreds in eternal moments of terror, and limbic entities emerged from beyond space and time to once more prey on Hadea. And it's into this maelstrom of passion and blood, of violence and terror, of human and supernatural, that Remi Letam falls. Shortly after separating himself from the ON forces, Remi stumbles upon an Omsif task force that was sent to assess possible time loop activity in Sinedra Forest, near the ruins of ancient Hadea. This underground fortress was once used as prison and staging area for captured Sabinians before their ultimate death in the nearby Arcus Spire during the Blood Queen's reign. Below, Remi confronts for the first time limbic entities. Impervious to conventional weapons, Remi is spared from the Hollow Walker by a last-second intervention of an Omsif warrior. She wears a red mask corresponding to the limbic sphere of rage and wields a limbic blade. With her death and the acquisition of an Omsif armored personnel carrier, Remi now has the tools necessary to safely navigate war-torn Hadea, confront limbic creatures, and pursue his parents' whereabouts. His first stop? The village of Jova. Mass graves, a laden lynching tree, smoldering craters. The war has swept through Akasa. Sabinians of the Asterian armed forces captured Jova and preyed on Palamist inhabitants. The blacksmith is missing, but Remi finds his apprentice. In Jova, Remi walks through his childhood home, filled with memories of a past life. Precious little is revealed about his mother, but Letam discovers his father's name is Vitalis, and he's more than a simple blacksmith. Vitalis is a member of the Vigil and a smith of limbic weapons. Not only can he answer Remi's burning questions about his youth, but he's also a source of knowledge on the Hollow Walkers plaguing the land. As he pursues Vitalis, Remi is himself dogged by Omsif and their field commander.
You have no idea who you've stolen from. Choose your next move wisely.
Her threats do little to dissuade a man who hasn't anything to lose. The trail brings Letam to the Vissa Hills, where fighting has broken out between an Omsif task force and their Vigil targets. For years, they had meticulously hunted and assassinated members of the Vigil. The organization's vow to prevent future calamities and their protection of the Eye of God runs in opposition to Zeal's desire. A clandestine war between the two factions has been raging beneath the surface of Hadea. A note left in Vitalis' underground shop by fellow Vigil member Damien reads in part, "It's become abundantly clear to me that we're being systematically hunted. This is more than mere coincidence. Entire chapters are going silent." Remi finds Vitalis to be the most recent victim of Omsif. Though he's too late for answers and closure, Letam finds new purpose in his father's death. Vitalis gives Remi a strange artifact, the Keystone of Grief, and charges him with the sacred duty of the Vigil. Remi, who all his life had been a loner and a drifter, finds himself back in his homeland with feelings of connection he had long thought severed. By accepting Vitalis' plea, Remi inherits his family's legacy and fights for something greater than himself. He works to uncover Hadea's secrets and prevent the country from being consumed in the conflict. Remi's mission? To find the 3 remaining Keystones, use them to access the ancient Fulgard failsafe, and end the calamity. Remi is aided in his quest by 2 individuals. An old Vigil named Gildis Brahm, within the Watcher's Nest, directs Letam to the Limbic Forge beneath Lake Cynon. This was the ancient keep of the Order of the Eye and the Fulgard, and deep inside rests the chamber where the 4 Keystones must be placed. Beyond lies the means to safeguard the future, seek out the previous calamities, for only those who truly understand the past may enter. This cryptic message hints at the other Keystones' locations and their connection to Hadea's past. Tanya Alvers, an investigative journalist whose decades-long obsession with Hadea built strong but secret connections with Vitalis and the Vigil. She intended to cover the Civil War and research the country's past, but was caught between the crossfire of Zeal and Vigil, Palamist and Sabinian. She and Remi together uncover clues as to the Keystones' whereabouts, which pull them across the war-torn land. As mentioned earlier, each Keystone is associated with a particular limbic sphere, human emotion, and linked to threads of the past. The Keystone of Rage connects to the vindictive reign of King Brahm of House Aster, and his ambition to rule a unified Hadea. In Leif's Ministry of Cultural Superiority, Remi uncovers troves of pro-Sabinian propaganda that paints the king as a valiant leader of Asteria. In truth, his life is filled with duplicity and blood. Brahm ruled Asteria for many decades, but his most significant contribution to history was his role in the Bridal War. The king had twins, a son Conrad and a daughter Fenello. Through marriage alliance with House Jihan, Brahm sought to extend his influence by a union between Fenello and von Jihan. As allies, these 2 kingdoms could compete against the growing western and largely Palamist threat of Argaw and Umbra. But Brahm had no intention of sharing power. as this inscription in the Jelgin cemetery states, "In a grand deception, Asterian soldiers replaced their lion crest with that of the Argolan star." On the eve of their wedding, the king of Asteria ordered 33 of his household guard to cloak themselves in Argolan regalia and assassinate Prince Vaughn. His subterfuge went unnoticed, and though Argo pled innocence, Jihan's rage was unquenchable. The bridal war began in 770 AD, and after raging for 3 long years, the combined might of houses Aster and Jihan claimed a glorious victory. In a valiant show of solidarity, they took revenge on the dastardly House Argo for their heinous attack on the sacred wedding ceremony of Von Jihan and Fenelo Aster. Through manipulation of Jihan's emotions, King Brahm ultimately assumed the crown as king of Hadea. His evil didn't end there. Ever jealous of his power, Brahm wished to use limbic entities that emerged from invasive time loops as weapons for his continued glory. The king built a secret research facility of underground tunnels called the Arga Museum, where his scholars studied hollow walkers. Even centuries ago, Hadeans suspected limbic creatures were tied to human emotion. King Brahm's scholars drew out the worst of themselves and their experiments. They brought forth rage, hatred, anguish to fuel their king's ambition. When Remi travels to the ruins of Arga, he finds the museum has exchanged hands but remains a limbic research facility. Zeal transformed it into an OMSIF research site where drones, weapons, and armor are developed to combat hollow walkers. Under the guidance of a madman named Dr. Mabden, the cruelest of experiments are performed to discover methods of controlling time loops.
Dr. Mabden.
Dr. Mabden is a cold-hearted son of a bitch. He's a liar and a manipulator. He's obsessed with the weaponization of the creatures and the time loops. Someone should stop him.
Deep in Sublevel 4, the Keystone of Rage pulses and infects Hadeans with violent thoughts, which the Doctor uses to control limbic activity. The next keystone, the Keystone of Ecstasy, is linked to the story of Francis Aldrich, his cult of TR, and the Palamist Inquisition that decimated it. Aldrich, once a faithful servant of Sethris, turned away from his religion following a limbic invasion. Francis concluded that the creatures were inevitable, a punishment for humanity's weakness. Hallucinogenic visions led Francis to a revelation. TR, the two-headed serpent, was the true god of humanity. His conversion spawned an insidious cult that spread throughout Hadea in the 850s. Pleasures of the flesh, uninhibited emotion, zealous devotion to TR. This was the cult's character, and Aldrich relied on physical and religious ecstasy to dominate his followers. Palamists persecuted this heretical cult more aggressively than they did Sabinians, but wishing to avoid bloodshed, Queen Viga Phalar of Hadea used royal largesse to gift a tract of land in the Plains of Mist. From the Queen's letter to Aldrich, "Here you will be freed to conduct your rites of worship and develop your community however you see fit. In exchange, you and your followers are to remain within the territory's borders and away from the faithful communities of the kingdom." The cult erected statues of hollow walkers and the two-headed serpent to give thanks to TR as it flourished in sanctuary. Deep underground, in a ritual chamber, the cult performed seances, orgies, and sacrificial rites, hallmark of their hedonism. In his visions, Aldrich discovered the timing of the next calamity and planned to open time loops in coincidence to usher TR's arrival. A few years later, as the cult spread, Queen Viga dispatched her closest friend, Lady Sophia Morton, as ambassador to Aldrich, but the poor woman was soon caught in the cult leader's dark desire. He seduced Lady Sophia, then prepared her as human sacrifice to TR. Her death, fuel for an ecstatic orgy timed with the arrival of the Calamity. The loss of Lady Sophia pushed the Queen to action, and the Inquisition of Palam launched an assault on Aldrich's hidden community in 871 AD. Viga's Order of Inquisition decree reads, ride forth to the plains of mist and unleash the 1,000 furies of Sethras upon them. Give no quarter. I want Aldrich alive. He will be made to answer for his sins. As for the rest, burn it all to the ground. The talons of the Inquisition attacked Aldrich's cult, but fell into his trap. Francis had dispatched servants of TR across Hadea to perform ritual sacrifice that opened time loops, from which poured legions of limbic creatures, in the Fourth Limbic Invasion. The Inquisition and the Order of the Eye were immediately thrown on the defensive, but not before they captured the heretic Aldrich, destroyed the Plains of Mist, and eradicated the cult. When Remi descends into the underground, its passageways still echo with carnal pleasures. Many doors and chambers require blood tribute to open. Only through pain can ecstasy be embraced. A few of the rooms bear cave paintings that seem to predate even Francis Aldrich and his cult. This could have been the location of a settlement of the ancient Hasselans who first worshipped TR. The central time loop here illustrates the Inquisition's raid and the collapse of Francis Aldrich's cult. Above rests the keystone of ecstasy, surrounded by a pile of bones and pool of foul liquid. A note left by Vigil General Olza reads in part, "The limbic entities here remain legion, slithering and unrelenting. Within this wretched and unfathomable temple, amidst its twisting halls of lies and folly, I have ascended to this nigh unreachable point. It is in this place I elect to enshrine and conceal my chosen burden." The final keystone, the Keystone of Terror, is bound to the reign of Queen Harver Rivetta of Argala, colloquially known as the Blood Queen, whose actions brought about a great genocide of Sabinians and the worst limbic invasion on record. Harver grew up hearing tales of her Uncle Thomas's time as a squire during the Palom Inquisition, and she developed a cold hatred towards heterodoxy in any form. A staunch traditionalist, Queen Rivetta was hailed as the inheritor of Palom, the guardian of the true faith, and she despised Sabinians. Harver Rivetta's storybook illustrates well the indoctrination Palomists used in their children's upbringing and the dehumanization of Sabinians. When Thomas Rivetta died, Harver acceded the throne, and shortly into her rule launched a war of extermination against Asteria and other Sabinian strongholds. As a symbol of her victory, and to spread her terror, the Blood Queen ordered construction of the Arcus Spire in 937 AD in the furthest reaches of Senedra Forest. Let this grand edifice stand as a testament to our righteousness, a shining beacon in the sea of immorality, a reminder to all that none escape his gaze. Here we purge heresy. Here we purify the kingdom. Here we reclaim our faith. Arcus was a structure of inhumanity. Sabinian prisoners were taken first to the neighboring Fort Mott, where they languished until their spirits broke. They were then taken in chains to the spire, forced to endure torture, made to walk up stairs studded with spikes. At the summit, Sabinians were set atop a bridge that spanned the spire's hollow interior, then kicked off, where they plummeted hundreds of feet to their deaths. Innumerable Sabinians were consumed in Rivetta's reign of terror. As sick pleasure, she gathered the bones of her victims as accessories and jewels. Mere mention of Arcus sent Sabinians fleeing for their lives. Rivetta's inhuman rule led to an explosive limbic invasion, and her legacy was etched into Hadea's history forever. The Blood Queen's rule ultimately ended in her assassination by members of the Order of the Eye, but her memory lingered. To Palomists, she's a rallying cry against Sabinian oppression. To Sabinians, she's a boogeyman, the terrifying shape of Palomist fervor. To reach Arcus Spire, Remi must first travel to Queen Rivetta's home region of Maristan. Here, 1,000 years after her reign, we still see how cruel Palomists can be to Sabinians. A massive statue of the Blood Queen has been erected in her honor, and the hanging coffins of the nearby mountain mark Harvor's own resting place. Inside the Queen's crypt, Remi uncovers a sword that acts as key to the Arcus Spire. An impossible mountain of skeletons demonstrates the cost of religious fanaticism. Only by navigating the torture chambers and ascending like a chained Sabinian to the spire's peak can Remi acquire the Keystone of Terror, an item imbued with the fear and loathing of Raveda's rule. All three keystones are suffused with such powerful limbic energy that to grasp them transports Remi to another dimension. Perhaps these are the limbic spheres, the native realms of the Hollow Walkers, each colored by their corresponding emotion, and each with a formidable guardian Remi must confront. Letam is pursued across Hadea by the Omsif field commander. At first, she sends units to apprehend Remi, but then has a change of heart when she learns his identity. They might not be enemies after all.
I'm Lieutenant Aribeth, Omsif's Epsilon Division. I'm also known as Aribeth Letam, wife of Vitalis Letam, and mother of a young boy I set free.
Aribeth Letam was once a member of the Vigil, wife of Vitalis and mother of Remi. As mentioned earlier, she tried to flee Hadea in the 60s with her son but was arrested at the border. For all this time, Aribeth believed Vitalis had betrayed her to the authorities, and while imprisoned, she was recruited by the Zeal Council. They wanted Aribeth's knowledge of the Vigil and its members, access to its locations. Turning against the Vigil was her vengeance against her husband.
My employers presented your mother with falsified phone records. It implicated Vitalis as the one who called the police the night she attempted to smuggle you out.
It's not revealed until Remi is himself caught by Zeal that the Council produced false evidence against Vitalis, that they manipulated Aribeth and she handed to them the Vigil upon a silver platter. As Remi gathers the artifacts, Aribeth plans to flee and meet him, but is found out. Finally, with all the keystones gathered, Remi descends into the Limbic Forge and places the artifacts in their slots, which unlocks the massive door, the Full Guard's failsafe. Behind is believed to be the truth of the Calamity and the key to restore harmony to the Eye of God. Remi follows a seemingly endless tunnel until he comes to the center of Mount Obek. This is the Chamber of the Eye of God. A massive, nearly perfect sphere rests in the hollow cavern. For over a millennium, scholars and scientists within the Order of the Eye performed research on the object, and now it's become a hub of experiment for the Zeal Council and their Omsif operatives. Crates, tents, computers, and ordnance are strewn about. For years, this was the center of Zeal's study, and an audio log left by one scientist hints at the Eye's power to deaden emotion. The cavern is a cold chamber of reason, Setharis' haven against the curse of TR. But on the eve of the Eye's 33-year cycle, members of Zeal performed ritualistic sacrifice before the object. The passionate bloodletting created a time loop, and the facility was overrun by Hollow Walkers. Who exactly these individuals are isn't certain, but two scenarios seem plausible. When the Eye opened, its overwhelming aura could have destroyed their minds and led to this suicide. Or, perhaps, the cult of TR remained strong in Hadea's secret corners, and these agents sought to bring about the coming of their god. In any event, closing the time loop opens access to a pedestal in the center of the cavern, the Full Guard's failsafe that has become the Vigil's inheritance. By placing his necklace within a slot, Remi activates the failsafe, which destroys the chamber and plunges the Eye of God into a hellhole of volcanic activity below. With the Eye no longer, Hadea's salvation is at hand. The country is finally free of the cycle, and though prejudice, hate, and fear still reign, the country might unite and pave the way to a more peaceful future. Remi is immediately apprehended by Zeal and brought to the interrogation room where the story opened. Before he's killed, however, Aribeth reveals herself and frees Remi. Mother and son escape the Zeal facility and, with their mission fulfilled, seek to rebuild their lives within the homeland for which they've sacrificed much. But this might not be the end. Zeal and Omsif have vast resources, and though they've been set back, the Council won't give up on the Eye's power so easily. Their drone, sent into Mount Obek's depths, relocates the Eye of God, which remains intact. As the book closes on Hadea, the fate of the country and the world hang over the edge. Thanks so much for watching and listening to this video on the complete story of Hell Is Us Explained. Let me know your thoughts on Hadea, the Eye of God, the Hollow Walkers, as well as suggestions for future videos in the comments below. And if you're a fan of lore and storytelling, be sure to subscribe to the channel where content is uploaded frequently. I'd like to take a moment to thank all my patrons over on Patreon. Their support means a lot and helps the channel continue to improve. If you'd like to become a lore luminary for access to me, written scripts, and early video drops, head to patreon.com/thelorebrarians to learn more. Until next time, go forth and explore the lore.